down in a Jeep or a large truck and you're off-road and you're rock crawling, you're in the sand, airing down to very low PSI means that you can crawl over those things. But the vehicles that are doing that are moving very slow, and they have 4 points of contact, and they have very large tires. So even when they're aired down, they have a lot of rubber and a lot of air between the point of contact and the rim that needs to be protected. Dirt bikes, they're down to 8 or 15 PSI, but the bikes are very light. When you compare that to an adventure bike, with a rider on board is probably 700, 800, maybe even 1,000 pounds of pressure on that wheel. When it impacts this hard route or a rock on the trail, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to air down on an adventure bike. You're going to damage your rim, you'll damage your tire, you'll damage the tube. There's very, very rare exceptions when I might air down. And so far, every video I've ever made,
10 seconds.
I've been running street pressures. In my world, airing down is a myth. All right, this myth goes like this. If I stand off-road, then I lower my center of gravity. And the thought process is that if I stand on the foot pegs as opposed to resting all my weight on my butt, then when I stand, because I'm supporting the majority of the weight down low, that I lower my center of gravity. That doesn't make a lot of sense, because that's saying that if I sit here and all of my weight is supported on my butt, that's the same as if I stand on the seat up here. Because all the weight is supported on the seat, my center of gravity should be the same. But if you think about it, that doesn't make much sense, does it?
10 seconds.
Now there is some advantages, some very significant advantages to standing. And one is that when I stand, I always get a better visual or better vantage. I can see potholes, I can see what's coming up much sooner. But it's not a totally a busted myth. It's not just about raising or lowering the center of mass. It's really about what is sprung and unsprung mass. Now this goes to suspension. When we look at suspension, the weight of the motorcycle when it's in motion is less important than the weight of the wheels.
Halfway there.
The wheels, the brakes, all of that sits below the spring. That's considered unsprung mass, and it can move very quickly and very freely. The weight above the bike sits on top of the springs. And though it has an effect, the most important part is the unsprung mass. If you stand on your motorcycle and you become sprung weight and the motorcycle becomes unsprung weight, you have 2 different tiers of suspension. The first being the shock or the forks on your motorcycle, the wheels below the motorcycle. The second being the motorcycle below you. As long as I can stay in a position and that bike can move freely up and down underneath me, it can move side to side, then standing becomes an advantage. But you have to be uncoupled from the bike. When we lock in at the ankles, the knees touch but don't squeeze, and the upper body always stays level as the motorcycle moves freely underneath us. It's not about raising or lowering the center of mass or the center of gravity. It's about changing sprung and unsprung weight. You as the rider want to become sprung weight above the motorcycle so the motorcycle itself doesn't have to account for your weight as it runs over obstacles or challenges. It's really that simple. So the myth is, when you stand, you lower your center of gravity or your center of mass, and that's just not true. Before we move on to the next myth, make sure that you hit subscribe, click like, and leave a comment.
Halfway there.
So this is the most dangerous off-road myth I can think of, at least today. And that is the belief that off-road you should only be using your rear brake. Off-road,
Halfway there.
on-road, it doesn't matter. Your front brake is your primary stopping brake. The rear brake for off-road is used for just sort of a sand anchor or a sea anchor where it kind of drags the rear of the bike. It can be used for turning or pivoting the bike. It can be used to
10 seconds.
assist the front brake as long as you keep that rear brake in a rolling motion. But your primary stopping is still the front. And that's what I've set up here to demonstrate.
Well done.
I made an approach speed of about 35 miles